Welcome everyone to this anniversary event of Women, Peace and Security on women's formal and informal roles in resistance and liberation movements during peace negotiations. We have an amazing lineup, and I'll get to that. But first, we have a few housekeeping rules. As you would have seen, there is simultaneous interpretation available in multiple languages. So you just select your language via the little globe icon and the flag. If there are any technical issues, use the Q&A function. And also, you feel free to submit any questions through the same Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And then we will try and address as many as we can during the end of the session. So, welcome everyone. This is a special year, and also this month is special as it marks the 25th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. It's been 25 long years, but we do have something to show for it. That's why we've also gathered all of you. What we've seen, despite maybe what we're seeing around the world exactly today, is that there is evidence to show that peace agreements are both stronger, more robust, and more lasting when women actually participate meaningfully. However, women negotiators from conflict parties are still rare, including in resistance and liberation movements. It doesn't mean that they're not there, because they continue to claim space, they redefine leadership, and also strengthen peace processes and make them more inclusive. I'm delighted today to introduce to you our inspiring speakers. We're so happy that you're here. These women are leaders. They're leaders in advancing peace, justice, and inclusion. And they do it through transformative leadership. First, I'd like to welcome Morena Herrera. If we could have a spotlight on Morena. Morena Herrera, she is from Salvador. She's an ex-combatant, a feminist. Our next speaker is Edita Tahiri. Can we spotlight Edita? There you are. Welcome, Edita. Edita is the former Deputy Prime Minister and Chief Negotiator of Kosovo. And the next one is Marta Rovira. Marta, she is today a peace and conflict transformation consultant and political advisor. We know Marta when she was the negotiator and the Secretary General of Esquerra Republicana de Catalunya. Welcome, Marta. Our next speaker is Maud Mayer, representative of the Karenni National Women's Organization. Welcome, Mayer. And lastly, we have the distinguished Norwegian diplomat, senior advisor in the section for peace and reconciliation at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Norway, Elisabeth Lothe. Welcome. Also welcome everyone who has joined us today for this conversation. Before we start the dialogue, I want to highlight a few things. What we call women in resistance and liberation movements might not be obvious to everyone, but they play critical roles across all the tracks of peace negotiation before, during, and after a peace process. However, what we've also found is that despite this, they still face it being made invisible, and they face barriers, and they face stigma. But to promote their participation actually broadens both the agenda and may even shift dynamics. Recently, Berghoff published a policy insight paper on women and resistance and liberation movements and what their roles in peace processes could have been. And I want to highlight some of those messages, and I'm sure in the chat you can find a link to this policy insight paper. Number one, women play vital roles across all tracks. Their work is often invisible, undervalued, or obstructed. They still face gendered violence, stigma, exclusion, and lack of protection. But their roles in bridging, in broadening agendas, in building legitimacy are indispensable, despite their invisibility. They are critical to the processes. And when included, we have really seen that agendas can shift towards justice, care, and actually addressing community needs. And what we've also seen is that their contributions go much far beyond the formal talks, but they also are used for sustaining dialogue, reintegration, and social cohesion. Some of these women are also very actively engaged in a lot of efficient back channeling. However, again, their roles remain under-recognized and actually also under-resourced. So our key recommendations to when you design processes, design beyond the table, bridge the tracks, invest in women, ensure security, and widen formal participation. In sum, women are agenda setters, bridge builders, and implementers, and we need to move from symbolic inclusion to genuine influence. My first question today will be to Morena, and Morena will also use a translator. Morena, are you there? There you are. So happy that you can join us. You have showed that also through history, you know, the real impact that women can have in processes. For you, in the Salvadoran peace process, I want to understand women played in the FMLN, they played key roles both during and after the negotiations, but still many of their contributions were unrecognized. But could you share with us how women in the movement, including yourself, helped shape these processes, and maybe why do you think that their efforts were often overlooked? Over to you, Morena.
Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación y un saludo para, me celebro que nos
Thank you very much
encontremos
for the
en este momento.
invitation, and I welcome
Yo
seeing
creo que
all
es
of you.
importante, primero,
I think it's
tener
very
en
important
cuenta
first
que en el
to take into
movimiento de
account
liberación del
that
Salvador,
in the
las
liberation
mujeres
movement of El
constituíamos
Salvador, the women,
alrededor del 30% de la fuerza
we were
guerrillera.
about
Es decir, éramos
30% of the
un
guerrilla forces.
componente
I mean,
importante de
we
la
were
fuerza
a very
militar
important component
y
of the
éramos
military forces,
alrededor del
and we were also
60%
about
de las personas
60%
que sostenían
of the
la guerrilla.
people who we
Es
were
decir, a la
holding the
base
guerrilla
social de
together. I
apoyo
mean,
que
to
se
the social
movilizaba
basis of support that was mobilizing
digamos, la
to,
guerrilla pudiera actuar.
let's say, the
Y en
guerrilla
este marco
could
la contribución fue muy
act
importante
and continue in this
porque, como
framework. Our
decíamos en
contribution was
aquella época,
fundamental because, as I
el
was saying
pez
back
no
at the time,
funciona sin
the
el
fish
agua, sin el mar,
can't
sin el
swim
ambiente que
without
la
the water,
sostiene.
without the
Y ese
ocean, without the
ambiente que la
environment
sostenía era
around
un
it.
ambiente
And that
fundamentalmente
environment, it
femenino.
was
De hecho,
fundamentally a feminine environment.
posteriormente a la guerra, nosotras
In fact,
hicimos
after
varias
the war,
investigaciones y a una la
we
titulamos
conducted several
Mujeres
researches, and one
Montaña,
of the titles
porque
of the
era la
researches was
montaña nutriente,
Mountain Women,
se
because
refería a eso.
we were like the
Cuando se
mountain with the
firmaron los
nutrients
acuerdos
that
de
we were
paz,
giving life. When we
si bien
signed the peace agreement,
estuvieron algunas mujeres en las mesas de
despite that
negociación,
some
algunas
women were
compañeras,
part of the negotiation table,
el
some of the comrades were
discurso,
there,
los
the
acuerdos
discourse, the
estuvieron
agreement
carentes de medidas que tomaran en
lacked
cuenta ese aporte de las
provisions that
mujeres y que
could take into
establecieran
account
medidas
the
para
women's participation
mejorar
and to
las
establish
condiciones de
measures to
posición
improve
y para
their
enfrentar
conditions, their
los
positions,
impactos que
and
implicaba
to
ese
face the
tránsito
impacts that
de
were
la guerra a la
meaning
paz.
that
Eso
this
estuvo
transit
ausente.
from war to
Entonces,
peace
una de las primeras
that was
cosas que
absent.
hicimos
One of
desde
the
las
first
organizaciones
things that we
feministas
did
fue
from the
organizar un
feminist
encuentro
organizations
nacional de
was to
mujeres
organize
donde al
a
mes de haberse
national women's
publicado los acuerdos de
encounter
paz,
after
presentamos,
a month
hicimos
after the peace agreements were
nuestro
signed,
análisis
where we
primero y
presented and we did
presentamos
our
nuestra
own
valoración.
analysis.
La valoración
And
en
then we
síntesis es
present
que no nos
our
encontrábamos
evaluation, and our
en esos
evaluation
acuerdos de
in
paz,
some was
estábamos
that we were
ausentes.
not included on this
Y
peace agreement,
eso
we were absent.
generó pues un impacto, una
And
cierta frustración,
that had
pero
an
tuvo
impact, some
como
frustration,
repercusión
but it also
una
has
decisión de las
had a
organizaciones.
repercussion on a
La
decision
decisión
from
de
the
que
organization,
solo nosotras con
decision to
autonomía
only that
íbamos
us
a
with
poder
the
construir un
autonomy, we
programa
were going to be
político
able
de
to build a
transformaciones que
political
incluyera
program
a
to
las mujeres
transform
como
that
sujetos
will
y que
include
incluyera
women as
medidas
subjects
que
and also to
implicaran
include measurements that
políticas
will
que mejoraran la
imply
condición de las mujeres. Y
policies to
esto
improve
tuvo
women's
una
condition.
concreción en el
And
programa que se llamó Mujeres
this became a
94,
reality on
que
a
fue
program that was called
presentado
Women
en las
94
primeras
that was
elecciones
introduced
en el
for the first
1994 después de los
elections in
acuerdos de paz. Y a
1994 after the
partir de
peace
ese
agreement.
momento hicimos un
And from
esfuerzo
that
de
moment on,
fortalecimiento de las
we
organizaciones de
did an
mujeres y
effort to
feministas
strengthening
y una
the women's
construcción de
organizations and
agendas
feminist organizations
desde la
and to
autonomía.
build
Pero también quiero
agendas
decirles que
from
decidimos
an
en
autonomy point of
algunos
view, but I
ámbitos
will
de los
also want to share
acuerdos,
that we
como por
perceive that in
ejemplo
some
el
spaces of the agreement,
programa
like for
de
example,
transferencia de tierras, que fue en términos
the
socioeconómicos el
land
programa más
transfers program that
importante,
that meant in
ahí
the
tampoco
socioeconomic terms
estábamos
the
las
most
mujeres.
important
Y
program.
empezamos a
There we
investigar
were
y nos
also
mostraron
absent as women, and we started
textualmente no había
researching,
mecanismos de
and we were
discriminación.
shown that textually
Entonces
there
nos
was
fuimos al
no
campo y ahí
discrimination mechanism, but what we
identificamos
did was to go to the
que el
field, and when we
mecanismo
went to the
era
rural
la
areas, then we
concepción
identified
de
the
la familia,
mechanism was
de
the
quienes hacían las
understanding of
listas
the
de las
family of who
personas
we
que
were
iban a ser
drafting the list, writing the
beneficiarias
list
con la
of the people
transferencia
who
de
were going to
tierra.
be
Aunque las
beneficiaries
mujeres,
with
aunque el
the land
acuerdo decía
transfer,
que se debía
despite the
transferir a
peace
quien
agreement
había
said
trabajado la tierra
that the
y las mujeres
transfer
eran las que
must have
habían
transferred to
trabajado,
who
si la
had
mujer tenía
worked the
pareja,
land, and the
estaba
women, we
viva,
were the ones who were
entonces
like it. And if the
pues le
women had a
tocaba la
partner and
tierra
the
a su
partner was
pareja. Pero
alive,
si la mujer tenía
the
un hijo
partner was
hombre
entitled
mayor de edad,
to the land. So
esa
if the
tierra
women had
pasaba a
a
su hijo.
male above
Entonces
age,
nosotras
the land
propusimos
was transferred
medidas
to her
de cambio
son.
y
So we
logramos que
tried
alrededor
to
del
create some provision to
35% de
measurements to change.
beneficiarios
We managed
fueron mujeres.
that about
Y así
35%
fuimos
of beneficiaries
avanzando
were
con
women,
algunos
and
mecanismos.
that's how we
Hicimos
advanced with
procesos
some
también
mechanisms.
de
We
trabajo emocional con las mujeres, con
we
las
did
familias,
some
para
emotional work
analizar
processes with
los
families,
impactos
with the
emocionales y
women,
sociales, por ejemplo, de la
to try
maternidad
to
interna,
mitigate the
de cómo
social
se
impacts
habían
of, for example,
constituido las
on
relaciones en
how
los
the
campamentos
relationships
y hacia
were
afuera.
constituted on
Y
the campaments
logramos situar
and
el
based on
problema
it
de la
to
violencia
outside.
contra las
And
mujeres
we
como un problema que amenaza la paz
worked with
y
the
que
violence
amenaza
against
la
women as an
convivencia
issue
social.
that is a threat to peace
Yo
and
diría que
to
esas han sido
social
las
livelihood.
respuestas
I think these will be the
y los procesos
answers
más importantes. Solo quiero
and the
decirles
most
dos cosas
important
más.
processes.
Uno
But I would also
es que
say two
30
more things.
años después
First
de la firma
is
de los
that
acuerdos de
30
paz,
years after the
algunas
signing of the peace
mujeres,
agreement,
bastantes en número,
some women,
resolvimos
many
construir
in numbers were saying like
asociaciones
that,
de
we
veteranas de
decided
guerra,
to create
porque hay factores que
veterans
están
of war
negando, siguen
associations because
negando
there
la
are some
contribución de las
factors that
mujeres.
are still
Algunas
being
de ellas no han
denying women's
recibido ningún
participation.
beneficio
Some
después
of
de los
them have
acuerdos de
not
paz
received
y
any
están
other
en
benefit
condiciones
after
muy
the
precarias.
peace
Y
agreement,
por otro
and
lado,
they are in
porque
very precarious
consideramos
conditions.
que
And we
nuestro
believe
aporte
that
a la
our work for recovering historic memory in terms of intergenerational terms is very important. And the second element is that right now, currently, it's being denied not only the women's work, but also everything that meant the peace agreement. And this is an authoritarian government that we are facing at the moment, and that also present other challenges for peace in this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Morena. You mentioned that you were 30% of the armed groups, and that is also something that we've heard from other groups. And can you imagine that's, a third of many movements consist of women, and still they're so rampantly invisible. Also, one of the important things you mentioned, I think, was even 30 years after the conflict, they're still dealing with the ramifications of that exclusion. And I mean, let us remember that for the conflicts we see today. I want to move on now to a very different conflict and a very different experience. Edita Tahiri. Edita, I remember you once told me that you entered as a politician primarily and not first as a woman, but you were constantly reminded by everyone that you were. From your experience in the Rambouillet Peace Conference and also the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, I want to ask you, number one, how did women actually manage to join what we call the formal peace process? And then my other question would be, if women from national liberation movements bring a different vision of peace than others, and how did that shape your role at the table? Edita, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody, again. Of course, 30 years ago was this process. Anyway, I still remember very fresh like today. I was never a politician, by the way. I was only the daughter of patriot. My father, who fought for the rights of Albanians. So when my country, Kosovo, got occupied, I somehow connected to the tragic destiny of my people. I felt the pain of their hardships, and that put me immediately to the engagement, to the movement in my city. It started in capital, and I mobilized women of my city in a massive protest. And that's how I was invited to become part of leadership, because I moved the city. They didn't know why, because I was only professor in electronics. Then I think that, how to say, disagreement with what was happening to my people. I stood up, was active, was proactive all the 10 years. I was one of the top leaders, inspiring my people to keep up the resistance. But I also became foreign minister of Kosovo, of occupied Kosovo, when nobody knew where is Kosovo. My job was to teach the world where is my country, etc., not to say to press for support for independence and freedom. So to answer shortly, I believe that there are two factors that brought me to the formal peace process of the Rambouillet Peace Conference. First was that I involved and became decision maker in the movement, as I was the only woman among 15 men in the leadership of the Democratic League of Kosovo, the liberation movement. So one factor was that. Second factor was that I was foreign minister and already had some background on negotiations, not on peace negotiations, but I negotiated with mindsets of the world because they didn't know who we are and even didn't know to understand why Kosovo people needs justice. Here shortly, we stayed firm, struggled with peaceful means, later joined army. Finally, we reached to internationalize the question of Kosovo, move the United States support and European members. That brought this peace conference in which I was only woman in the delegation, or again 15 men. All my life was 15 men, one woman. But I know that you women who are in similar situation. In the occupation time, men doesn't prevent us to be active because they like the support of women. But what happened after the war was the paradox we faced. That paradox was men running after political power, women were put on sidelines, and I found myself to see injustice against my gender. Before I was fighting injustice against my nation. After the war, I faced this. When I say I, because I took the initiative to create grand coalition of all women from politics, civil society. Through that grand coalition, I succeeded to establish quota in the first year after the liberation. First elections in Kosovo, we hold with quota of 30%, today is 50%, so we are speaking like 30 years after. So we put the basis, and I'm very happy where we are today in Kosovo. We have women in government, in parliament, in peace processes are still low, like in the world, unfortunately. I would like to say that though we are marking 25th years of the resolution of WPS, really we acknowledge achievements, but there is low participation of women in formal peace processes and in decision in government, because I think men are ready to share parliament, but they are not ready to share government with women. And lastly, what I would say as a recommendation for the woman for after war period or for the peacetime, women should be immediately active to take part in the transitional processes from war to peace, meaning state building, peace building, because nobody invites women. On contrary, men doesn't like much to share, but we women should really never stop in our goal until we see the society inclusive, just, because the society cannot be just if some part of the population are not included to decide the future and to implement the peace and prosperity in the country. I think there is one question I have to answer. I will do it. Are there differences in the vision of women and men for peace? I think yes, there are differences. I speak from the practice of the International Peace Conference in Rambouillet that brought peace and freedom to Kosovo and later independence. I think men's vision is for peace is arms to stop, whereas women's vision for peace is hardships and pains of people to stop. So this is shortly how I see. There, of course, to elaborate more, women think of people's needs. So they want to be addressed in the peace agreement. But at the men, they think what happens to their political future after the war. So they want to profit from this process to, of course, take power, take leadership. So these are differences, and there are egos. Men have rivalry in the peace processes. Our delegation we were divided between peaceful movement and army. That ego who is going to dominate the delegation, I was the one to unify our delegation. Why I engaged? Because without unification, we could not sign the peace agreement. So because I was the woman and had this credibility of being one of the top leaders and foreign minister, and also coming from patriotic background, nobody rejected my leadership to unify delegation in Rambouillet. That ended up in success. We signed the agreement and changed our people's destiny from oppressed people to the free people. Here I finish.
Thank you so much, Edita. I think it's fascinating, and you already highlighted so many things. I mean, one is to be proactive and active, and then, if you are in a leadership position already, and the sort of legitimacy, but then I think most importantly, what you highlighted now is, and what I think we should also think about for conflicts going on now, today, is yes, you want to stop the war, maybe with arms, but then what? And then also how even those women who were active in the conflict, in the peace negotiations, then after war are again excluded, as you described, and then how you fought for the quotas. Another important point that I think is almost universal is coalitions. To create coalitions, women really, need to have allies. Okay, again, we are moving across the world to a completely different context. Edita explained about a process that actually came to an end, right? Damiar, I want to invite you. You are active in a context where formal peace processes are, if not stalled or frozen or non-existent, but it doesn't mean that nothing is happening. Peace work is still taking place, let's say around the edge. But in such contexts, what roles are women, including yourself, playing in those moments when there is nothing formal? And how can you and how are you helping to prepare the ground for what is to come and what we wish to come for peace? Damiar, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And then also thank to Bhagor Foundation for the opportunity to speak with the honorable speaker. I have a very small experience, but I'm very grateful to share my perspective today. So I like to begin with something that guide my journey, the political commitment to have a meaningful participation of women in every level of decision making. So we started with at least 30% of women participation in every level of decision making as a guiding policy. So this is not just a number, it's a principle that's opened the door for women who can shape the future for our country. So because of this, I became the General Secretary of the Karenni State Consultative Council, KSCC, representing women's organization. At first, I was seen as a token representative, but this position gave me a real opportunity to lead and make change. It allowed me to show that women are not only participants, we are also a leader, decision maker, and the peace builder. So our KSCC is the first revolutionary government body in Karenni State after 2021 military coup in Myanmar. So we are building our revolutionary government body with the belief that peace cannot be achieved without women. My role has been to help shape gender-responsive policy and making sure equality is not just written down, but put it in action. So let's look at the broader picture of Myanmar conflict. Our country have lived through more than 7 decades of war, civil war, and the conflict. I want to stress that we never really had a real peace process. Because around 2010, the military trying to create what they call a so-democratic government under the 2008 constitution, but it was only a controlled democracy. And there was a brief period of negotiation with ethnic resistance movement, and then it became nationwide ceasefire agreement, NCA. But that was not inclusive, equal, or genuine. Especially that process what excludes the women and diverse ethnic participation in our country. So it became nothing more than just a piece of paper. It failed to deliver the true peace. So since around that period, our women organization, we have been advocating for at least 30% women participation, and it has been, many decades. But still, women remains excluded, especially in the defense and security discussion, where discussions about peace and conflict are made, we are still, excluded. And in 2021 military coup in Myanmar, the so-called former peace process collapsed. A nationwide movement against military coup and justice rose up. And in that moment, women became visible like never before. We saw a lot of women in the street leading a protest, challenging the patriarchal norms. And also at the same time, when the humanitarian crisis came because of the military violence, we also provided humanitarian support, health, educational service, documenting human rights abuses. Additionally, lots of women joining the armed groups in the resistance movement, and also in the political platform like myself. So even without an official peace process, women have been doing peace work around the ages, building trust, care for community, and keeping hope for the peace. In my own experience, I see how women carry the burden. We live in the public life and politics, yet we are still expected to take care of traditional family roles. In a militarized and patriarchal society, leadership is often seen as a man's job. But women continue to lead quietly and powerfully. Even now, women are rarely given position in home affairs, defense, something like that. So, but we contribute in different ways. We have this gender policy framework. One of the most impactful example of my own experience. We take a central role in development of this framework and trying to institutionalize gender equality within political structure during the time of armed conflict and displacement. So additionally, we also trying to organize a community, and we also build a more social reliance in the time of conflict. So this is the real important peace building work, I believe. Even, where the formal peace process is non-existent. So when we talk about preparing for the ground for peace, I believe women are already doing it day by day, every day, creating dialogue, protecting life, and ensuring that revolution includes justice and equality. But to make the chain lasting, we must go beyond individual action. We must institutionalizing gender equality throughout the movement. It must be built in our system, laws, and political structure, so that the woman participation become real and permanent. So my message is simple. Peace is not only about designing agreement, it's about building relationship, trust, care, and fairness in our everyday life. We have to choose this every day. So that's what we are doing, women across Myanmar, and especially in current state are doing right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. So from this, it was so powerful. 30, we often hear quota, we often hear 30%, but the real insistence, 30% is not a number. It's not a number, it's a principle. Also, when you're tokenized, ignore it and just start to be decisive and take decisions. And I think you also highlighted something that hasn't been mentioned before, is the double burden. And this goes really across the board. Thank you so much for that. We're going back to Europe now. Marta, we know from experience that many women from resistance and liberation movements, they feel isolated, stigmatized in the sort of formal negotiation space, and that they're often at a disadvantage. But in your experience, how did you navigate those challenges, and how can you continue to stay meaningfully engaged in the process? Marta, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, first of all, for organizing this panel and to giving us the possibility to share and to visualize our experience as women negotiators. And then, I can share with you some of the challenge I faced as woman negotiator. And what is most important for me is what worked for me to overcome the main obstacles. I have 6 minutes, I think. I will share with you only the 3 main challenge and how I worked to overcome the main obstacles. The first thing I learned is that you should have a strong mandate and legitimacy from your own people. And this perhaps it seems obvious, but it's not easy. First of all, because often people who are coming from liberation and resistance movement, we are perceived as the problem to be managed, not as legitimate actors or interlocutors seeking a democratic solution. So we have to overcome this kind of profile. And then because when you are coming from RLM movements, entering to these formal negotiations feels like stepping into a space that was never designed for you. For me, that means because you are moving from the dynamics and language of a struggle to another kind of dynamics, negotiation dynamics, power institutional dynamics, or, for example, protocol dynamics, negotiation dynamics, and it's a different language. And because RLM movements, when we are entering to this negotiation space, we are doing another movement. In fact, we are coming to from a collective legitimacy, I would say, mobilization, a lot of power, to individual scrutiny. We are sometimes alone at the table, and we have to explain why we are sitting at this table and why we are negotiating. And for women, this transition is even harder, I would say, because we know that we have to prove our legitimacy twice. We have to prove our legitimacy as a woman, and also as negotiators. What helped me to understand that legitimacy should always come from your own movement, organization, political party, because you are representing these people and their aspirations, and you should have a clear political mandate from people you represent. And it's crucial to build it, but not only to build it. It's crucial to constantly renew the mandate with a lot of internal consensus. For example, in my political party, there were different kind of visions, interests about how to approach the negotiation process. And of course, diversity is natural, is democratic, is good, but it creates a lot of pressure. And it could create some kind of, I don't know, perhaps internal divisions, fragmentation. So I had to manage, I had to deal with this. I had to build internal consensus. I worked hard to clarify, to update, to renew this kind of political mandate again and again. And when you have this strong political mandate, political leadership direction, and all the preparation teams are aligned, were aligned, in fact, in our negotiation process. And then also the negotiation strategy is coherent all the time. The second lesson I got from my experience from the negotiation process is that women, airline women, we are suffering a context of repression, political repression. And that is making everything more and more complex. For example, in our case, we faced persecution, accusation of rebellion, sedition, and even terrorism. And women, we are suffering gender attacks at the same time. I remember a lot of pressure from social media, from media, all the narrative, with a lot of gender repression, I would say, yeah, and sometimes overexposure, sometimes complete silence. I remember I was labeled too radical because of my ideology and my political ideas, and sometimes too weak, simply because I'm a woman. I was a woman leading the negotiation. So I faced also moral trials for being a mother, for being a woman, and okay, I'm having my own thinking projects for my country. So how did I face it? Okay, I decided to stay focused all the time, and by never letting others define who I was, and trying, because you cannot control what others project on you, but you can decide not to carry it. And for the political repression also, we decided to internationalize. And we achieved great resolutions from United Nations, from the Council of Europe, and several international courts, which recognize our rights and which recognize that, okay, there was a political conflict. There was a conflict, and the nature was political. And then the third, perhaps the third lesson I want to share with you is that we were suffering a lot of asymmetry, right? Yes, the symmetry was there. Compared to other negotiators from government delegations, for example, who were not criminalized, not spied, who could go home and sleep well every night and well prepared to attend to the table. And I had to build a strategy, trust, and resilience, and from distance, because I was living in Geneva in exile situation. But I learned that asymmetry doesn't necessarily mean weakness. For me, it means you are operating from a different position, of course, with fewer resources, more obstacles, and so on. But my turning point was to recognize the asymmetry, not as a defeat, but as a source of awareness, strength, and use a lot of creativity to overcome this sensation or perception sometimes of asymmetry. And once you accept it, you start to work with a lot of new ideas and a lot of creativity, and we started to overcome the situation. And what helped me the most was discipline and organization, a lot of preparation. We prepare more than anyone. We train, we design the negotiation process with a lot of strategy. We created strong teams, clear priorities. We design how we imagine the negotiation process, and we also relied on external support with capacity building programs that help us stay so focused and so professional during all the process. The last recommendation for me as a woman was facing all of these challenge is to believe, to have a lot of conviction that change is still possible, that you will shift the agreements or the political objectives, the goals you have, to prepare with a lot of strategy, and to never give up. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Marta. Prepare, never give up. But I also heard many other interesting things, especially about the constituency. And you did also now address sort of some of the specific challenges, the sort of online harassment and things that is, in fact, very gendered. And we hear it a lot. Before I turn to Elisabeth Lotta, I'm going to give you all speakers a challenge. In one word, if I could have you, just one word, if you could give a recommendation to the community, but also perhaps maybe governments, how they can better include women in processes. One word. Start with Morena. One word.
Imaginación.
Imagination.
Imagination.
Edita. I know you want to say many words. Get one.
One. Never give up.
Yeah.
Idealism for your people.
Idealism.
It's not one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Idealism.
It's okay. Demiar.
Change the narrative.
Change the narrative. Marta.
For me, it's sustainable peace. If you want a good agreements and sustainable peace, women must be there.
Women must be there. Thank you so much. And if you do represent governments or actors, you heard these women. These are the most important things. I want now to turn to Elisabeth Lotte. Elisabeth, your government has been known for a very, very long time to actually really invest and support in women in all aspects of peace processes. And I want to understand better from you, knowing this, you know that women in these movements bring the unique perspectives. But from your countries, both the mediation and the women, peace and security sort of leadership perspective, how can the wider international community better recognize and integrate these women's contribution so that they can truly shape both the negotiations and the outcomes? What would your recommendations be? Over to you, Elisabeth.
Thank you for those questions, Chris, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Most of all because of this opportunity to listen to the other speakers. Very impressive experience and recommendations. And one thing that struck me, these contexts we have discussed are very different. I think a common thread is that there were very few or no opportunities, especially once negotiations started or we got to the transition for women. But then, as Marta said, from that moment on, each of you were able to step up and find a new path forward to really make an impact. And it's just really interesting to hear how you went about that and the lessons you have shared so far. I think it's really good that you have decided to center this discussion here today from Berghoff on this topic, because if you're going to move ahead with better integrating and supporting also women from resistance and liberation movements in peace processes and recognizing both the formal, informal, visible and invisible roles they play, the first thing we have to do is to understand better. I think you've made it quite clear that these challenges, but also ambitions that you have, they're not well understood. We know that, as you said, Chris, that there is a lot of barriers to engaging. When it comes to women and resistance and liberation movements, there's a lack of attention, there's lack of opportunities, there's lack of legitimacy, as Marta touched on, funding. We really have to bring this to a higher level of consciousness and more broadly to our partners that work on supporting these efforts. Because as you said, if we want inclusive processes, that needs to go from both sides or all sides of a conflict. So we need this kind of work to better grasp the barriers and the challenges and the needs, put it out there so that both we as states, NGOs, regional organizations, and for example, the UN can be more conscious of this. The documentation and research that Berghoff has been doing has been important, and it's actually quite unique, I find. Policy recommendations, events like this. We also tried to do that when we gathered focal points for WPS in Oslo earlier this year, presenting these voices to focal points from almost 100 countries. So we have to keep doing that. That being said, this is about much more than seminars and conferences, of course. Once we can get to the level where there's a realization that this group is really important and deserves support and can make a huge difference on sustainable peace, we also have to make sure that bridges can be built for support, right? So that brings me to my second point. In order to effectively integrate this, these needs and concerns and contributions, we need to build more of the direct bridges externally, I think also. We grapple, we have invested a lot in trying to promote women's roles and perspectives in peace processes, and we grapple with how to go about that all the time, and see that this is even harder when it comes to women from resistance and liberation movements. There are so many barriers. For Norway, it's not a barrier that we cannot talk to everyone, because we talk to all conflict parties. We really believe that's necessary. But then how do we get to talk to the women from these groups? There are barriers, and we see that when preparations for dialogue starts, exploratory talks, when you get to the table, only part of groups and movements usually come forward, and they are always men. So that is quite a significant barrier to us. We have, from our side, really committed to start early, start from the start, to be highly attentive to women's groups, women that can come forward and play key roles. So now we just really have to work on making sure we get to the women from the resistance and liberation groups early as well. For this, I'm a strong believer in networks, and I've seen that in practice, how important it is. We work our own networks persistently, and the networks that come from projects like the WRLM project at Berghoff has been really valuable as well, I think. There are NGOs that span conflict lines. We have to think about how we can do more with the Geneva Calls, the NRCs, other organizations to extend our reach. When we have training in Norway, we do the annual ceasefire course. We always invite conflict parties. We make a point out of emphasizing participation from both men and women from both sides. A lot of good connections and networks have come out of this as well, to give a concrete example. So that's a little bit how it looks from our side, and my thoughts on how we can have better reach. But I wanted to say that these bridges also can be worked on from the other side, right? I just want to put out there that Norway is a supporter of your role in peace processes as well. And it's important that you feel that you can also reach out, whether it's to our colleagues on the ground in embassies, for example, because this is high on our agenda. Before I finish up, I just wanted to share a few thoughts on what we can do to support. I'm not here to tell anyone what anyone needs, and I have seen from the presentations how different each context is, and how very different role has been taken on. But I think a general observation I have and we have after supporting peace processes for many years is that there's no substitute for empowerment. People work with that in their own way and in their own context. But empowerment is really a crucial ingredient in taking on different roles and gaining visibility for the work. We do see that when we're able to help support spaces where women can exchange and support each other to strategize, build capacity, it can really make a big difference. So that is something I think that the international community can support where asked for. We support NGOs that have different kind of entry points and different capacities. And I'm happy to hear that some of that support has been valuable. And I think based on the research paper and discussions we've had as well, we see that sometimes a little can go a long way. I think it was from Colombia, the example of being able to connect with a female counterpart in the facilitation team made a huge difference for breaking out of isolation, for example, and perhaps also reducing a little bit of the stigma that Marta described so well. We're conscious as Norway that we need to lead by example and have women in our own teams, and I think that sometimes have proven to be useful for creating those bridges between women as well and the empowerment that provides. Yeah, so to sum up, there's a lot of work that can be done, and I hope some ways we can support as well. There's no silver bullet. But I do think, as Edita said, step by step, we are moving forward, although we're far from implementing the 1325 agenda to the extent that we would like.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth. And I'm thinking, you said, you build the bridge from both sides. You don't, start in the middle or at the one side. So that's really important to remember. And I guess, we are also a strong believer in the networking, and we have actually really seen the effects of that. And the third point, I think, is what you said, that resonates with what some of the other speakers said, for them to internationalize the conflict means actually reaching out to governments such as yours or others to make it visible and seen. And again, thank you so much, Norway, for also really living by example. Thank you, Elisabeth. I want now to invite all of the speakers back to the floor, the virtual floor, and also want to welcome some of the questions. Some of the questions that you have sent in the chat, I'll try to maybe fuse some of them, and also, so the first question from the audience, I will address it to Morena and to Marta, and it writes, who drives and decides on the integration exclusion processes? Definitely, it cannot be left in the hands of men. How can women make sure that they are in decision-making processes from the beginning? Actually, even Edita could have answered, but Morena and then Marta, please.
Yo creo que es fundamental.
I believe that it's fundamental that from the feminist movement and from women's movement, we can bring the autonomy as a key element to decide on our own agendas based on the interest and motivation, the issues that we, as women, we are facing when we signed the peace agreement in El Salvador. Still, we didn't have, still was not built the 1325 resolution, but it was seen how other movements from other countries like Guatemala and then Colombia have learned from processes in which women, we have been denouncing the gaps, we have been denouncing the absences So I believe that it's important to appropriate, to own this resolution, and to carry learning processes of women among countries, and to achieve to build networks around the world. I think this is very important. And from the autonomy, this agenda, this construction, and to be able to say that without us, without women, they are not going to be possible to have lasting peace processes. Our absence is a gap that cannot be overlooked. And lastly, I think it's important that the contribution that we can do to recover the historic memory, aiming to exchange and to create intergenerational dialogue, meaning to achieve that women, that the youth, if possible, the youth males can also get to know our experiences that we have had, how we have faced exclusion, and what our standing point to continue struggling to strengthening the critical thought and based on the learning from the past and looking forward to the future. That will be my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Morena. And Marta?
Yeah, Vito, perhaps.
After.
Oh, okay. In my case, it was okay. It was my position as the Secretary General of my political party who helped me to be there. Yeah, but I think it's important to have done a lot of work inside our associations, organizations, political parties, and society to achieve the 50-50 equality in each space of decision, in all of the spaces. And we did it, we reached this objective in our political party. And that was the main reason why a lot of women were there preparing in the preparation team, in the negotiation table, because it's impossible for us to understand a decision-making space without this balance or equity, 50-50 men and women being there and deciding together. And then perhaps another thing, we need to rethink the resolution. Yeah, because 25 years after the resolution, okay, we must rethink everything because the world is different, the political conflicts are different, women are everywhere, and we want to contribute. We want to our future, to peace, to the world, and we want to decide also everything. So perhaps it's a good time to advocate for a new resolution and to rethink the resolution with some kind of equality.
Thank you, Marta. It's fun that you said that because usually I say we don't need another resolution. We already have 10. We need to do the work. It's all there in the resolution. Just do it. But I do understand what you mean. It's very sort of time bound in a sense, and we are living in a very different time. But sure, Edita, like, how do you get what Marta said is that, if you live in a patriarchal or a society where women are already excluded, of course they're not going to be official negotiators. So how do you work on that before, and how do you claim that space? Edita, the one woman with the 15 men. Edita, go ahead.
Chris, as we are speaking of resolutions, I think time has come to have 1325 plus.
Plus.
And yeah, what is this plus? That we need finally to start to speak as women for political power for women. And the resolution 1325 doesn't mention political power. And even we women have not integrated in our strategies of empowerment. We want to be in the formal peace processes, but it doesn't come without we reaching the gender equality in political power. So this is my suggestion. We must integrate in our strategies for WPS. We should not be afraid of this notion of political power because it is enough in the hands of men. Time is to come to women's hands first. Second factor that I'm lobbying, but will say again here. I think we should lobby to expand the legal framework for peace processes. What I mean, there should be call on quota 50% for women in negotiating delegations for peace agreements and 50% women in the mediating delegations. Because if we can reach this kind of legal instrument, I don't think so men are ready to include women in the formal peace process. I told my example, but it came through the political empowerment leadership. But as we see the daily dynamics of politics, women doesn't reach peace tables that easily. And we remain only in track 2. I think this is enough for us to stay in track 2 process. We must move to track 1. That's my answer.
Thank you, Edita. I saw a picture from the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting, the Gaza Trump meeting. And I do know Meloni was there, but she wasn't in the picture. It was just only men. And the picture looked so 1990s, but that's where we are. I want to turn now to Damia. You have a question from the audience that reads the following. What kind of alliances can we build to support the role of women in peace building more generally? Like if you just think of alliances, what kind, how do we do it? What do you need from us and from the networks to be able to build these alliances? And what would they focus on also?
Yeah, I want to respond in 2 layers. The first thing is when we talk about alliances internally in our internal revolution, we usually align with the powerful men because, if we align with the powerful, structure power position, then we can be, easily taking some decision making. But actually, we need to reflect and we need to change our alliance because we really talk about the informal peace process. So there are a lot of processes have been going on. We need to recognize that we need to build alliance amongst the informal activity, movement, organization, and also secondly, in the more broader level, we also need to recognize the movement, whether it is small or whether it is big, that we need to recognize that there is a movement that we need to align. There's a need that we really need support. For example, like as the other experience speaker says, the political space is not designed for women. So the women somehow, join in this and then became patriarchal because they have to fit in the, political organization. So that's why women also sometimes become the gatekeeper. So it's really important to make it align with the grounded women's organization, ground movement. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also, Edita, you want to come in on this one, alliances?
Yes, I would like to share our example as we have the network of women in the southeastern Europe. It is the regional women's lobby, for which I am the chair for more than 20 years. But what I want to tell you, last year, because in the Balkans and peace processes were blocked, especially between Kosovo and Serbia. The EU facilitated dialogue blocked. Even implementation of the peace agreement reached 2 years ago never started. So last year we mobilized in a regional conference of 7 countries and all important communities, because interethnic relations in Balkans are not at the best level. So thanks to the organization called Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, also called as a rapid response window, we organized conference, address the challenges of the bloc dialogue, and with inclusive participation of all participants, we send a message to Brussels, to Belgrade and Pristina, to Kosovo and Serbia authorities and EU authorities, calling as regional women's voice to resume dialogue, because anyway, the fragile peace in the Balkans was being threatened, also security, and not to mention the geopolitical dynamics and difficult situation in the world.
Yeah.
I must tell you that the dialogue resumed in Brussels. So it was maybe not our push, but also their awareness of this kind of negative impacts. I just want to once again highlight, networks are very important, and ours is of post-war network, and we still continue. We are featured in the knowledge product of the UNDP as an example how women should network for addressing the challenges of society, states, region, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Edita. No, I mean, many times we hear also on the Women's Peacebuilding Fund and how important it has been and really delivered. Elisabeth, I want to give you the last question from the audience, so I have to read it for you. You mentioned that women's inputs are still not sufficiently included in peace processes, even when they are present. But from a process design perspective, what measures then could one do during the preparation, the exploratory phase, the preparation phase, to ensure the genuine both empowerment of women, but also involvement of women in those very processes? So if you just like zoom out a bit and think process design. But over to you, Elisabeth.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a very good one. When it comes to having an impact on the negotiations and being supportive of how to bring those forward, I think, I mean, there's many things, right? In order to get the women to the table, that's the first question. And it comes, when I think about what we can do, it comes back to what I touched on about starting early to make sure we have a good understanding of women's groups, the women's movement, individuals that are affiliated or working with the groups, to map that out, not to come and offer support, but to be in contact to find out how we can support. I think what we see, of course, there are many strong women's groups and alliances, and even when not visible. And it's about finding the entry points for that, because then we can support by both if it's technical requests, ceasefire, getting ready for negotiations. Sometimes that support is demanded, Sometimes it's more, as a facilitator, for example, we can never force parties to bring anyone to the table, but we can surely encourage and nudge and assert that women's participation is very important for the outcome and legitimacy of a process. So we have to work on several entry points, I think, to get to that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I mean, I feel that what you just said is so important. Of course, as a facilitator, a mediator, like a third party, I mean, you have a mandate, of course, to be there, but you can never force. And a lot of people expect that from the third party, right? But why don't you just tell them to bring more women? But that is really not it is hard for the third party. But as Elizabeth said, you can be so smart about it and do it in many, many different ways. You know, the nudging, asking the right kinds of questions to which maybe those men cannot answer. And then therefore they need to consult women in their own movements as well, but also in the sort of general society. Okay, thank you. This has been just like the richest conversation. I really want to also give a big shout out to my team who put all of this together and it helped us also prepare, because I find it, just such an honor to be in this virtual room with all of you, and I feel I learned so much. And I will go to New York to be one of the briefers on the Secretary General's pledge on women and mediation. And I feel you gave me so much information and data, and I will just convey what you said. But before closing, we are commemorating the anniversary of Resolution 1325. And I'm going to ask you to be short because of time, but if you could change just one thing, so not a recommendation, but if you could change one thing immediately, that would make it more inclusive and meaningful, especially for women in resistance and liberation movements. And what would it be? Just if you could change one thing, I'll start with you, Elizabeth. What would you change?
Oh, that's a intriguing question. Many things going through my mind. Of course, if you could dream big, Edita has already touched on the quota, and if you just go with 50-50, of course that would have a very immediate impact. I don't know, maybe to be. I think I'll go maybe with funding. I mean, we do know funding doesn't solve everything, but sometimes power also comes with funding and empowerment, and you can do many things with if you have funds, right? Funds that reach the ground, funds that can be used to support in informal and formal roles. So if you could have a slush fund, perhaps that women from all sides could tap into to cover their needs to get to where they need to be to the table for rapid response. Slush fund.
Yeah, wonderful. Flexible, innovative funding.
Long
Thank
term,
you.
short term.
Yeah. Damiar, one thing that you can change immediately, what would it be?
Yeah, it's kind of like imaginary question. So if if I have the power to change, I will think, if I want everyone to think like a feminist. Yeah.
Yeah, feminist agenda, feminist mediation. All women mediation teams, how would that look? I don't know. It hasn't ever existed. Edita, if you could change one thing immediately, what would it be?
Unstoppable for us, for women.
Say again, I couldn't hear you.
Unstoppable
Yeah.
for women to be equal and take leadership.
So that it would already be a fact. Women would already be equal and have leadership. Wonderful. And women would be unstoppable. Over to you, Morena.
I didn't understand you. I don't think so. We are already equal.
Bueno, yo si pudiera erradicaría la violencia contra las mujeres.
I will stop the violence against women, including the state violence against women, as we are seeing the persecution to abortion. I will change that to abort will become a crime and that will become an essential health service and no more violence against women from men and from the state.
Thank you, Morena. End violence against women, super crucial. Marta, one thing.
I think the resolution needs intersectionality because women, not all women experience conflict in the same way. And there are a lot of reasons of exclusion of women on this agenda. So perhaps linked peace to justice, social justice, to, I don't know, civil and political rights, and to women, finally. So intersectionality.
Thank you, Marta. Intersectionality. I think, I mean, in just closing this very rich conversation, I've heard so many things. I mean, it's about women's leadership, formal and informal, like in political decision making, yes. It's about ending violence against women. It's about being aware, asking the questions. It's what also Elizabeth said, to understand. And in order to understand, we have to ask questions. It's also, like Demiar said, we have to, have it's a holistic perspective. It's not just like on the one issue. But on the other hand, as others also said, how do you identify and find entry points? Elizabeth said ceasefires is one thing. There could be many other topics. And how do we do it creatively, innovatively, smartly? And also, how do we do it, without money? Or how do we find the funding or the support or the political buy-in for all of those things? I think it's hard to say how to be smart about it. I mean, you win some, you lose some. But as Edita said, it's like in a way also one step at a time. And we are building and building and building. And even if we are watching a backlash now, not only to women's rights, feminism, but also civil and political rights, this shrinking space for civil society and increased authoritarianism, which is, I'm sorry, it's never good for women. Just putting it out there. So, how are we smart about it? And I think we can be smart about it by networking, by talking to each other, by asking people from Salvador and from the Karenni Women's Movement and from the Catalan people and from Kosovo and Norway and me here in Berlin, just this conversation. And I hope for those of you who listened in or watched in today, that you also feel that, the richness of the conversation will inspire you to actually, and to oppose Marta a bit, not maybe we need another resolution, but to actually make this happen, make this a reality, that women, peace and security are interlinked. We cannot have peace and security without women's inclusion, and we cannot have peace without inclusion. And whose security are we talking about? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, backup team, comms team, the whole Berghoff team for setting this up. Thank you, audience, for being there. You can keep up to date with some of our material. There's a link in the chat. We had over 100 participants listening in today, and wishing you a continued good anniversary year of women, peace, and security. Thank you very much.